All right, in today's video, I'm going to rank the best NBA finals out of the last, 25 years. Now, there are three scales upon which I'm judging this. One is competitiveness. So the more competitive in NBA finals, the higher I'm gonna give its ranking. The second factor is uniqueness. So is there something about this NBA finals that didn't happen in any other year? That's something that sets it apart. Was there some sort of historical precedent that was set? And then the third is its impact. Did this NBA Finals have an impact on the league going forward? Was it, a monumental achievement that cemented a certain player's legacy? But of course, ultimately, this is subjective. Let's start with something that I think uncontroversially belongs in the S tier. Uncontroversially, I think one of the best NBA Finals series of all time, the 2016 NBA Finals. Obviously, there's a historical precedent of coming back down 3-1. You have the triumph over the greatest regular season team of all time. I think even if you're a Warriors fan, you have to admit that this was objectively one of the best NBA Finals we've ever seen. And now I'm gonna go with something that I think is also, uncontroversially, one of the worst NBA Finals, the 2007 NBA Finals. This is the year where the Cavaliers got swept by the Spurs. You had a very young LeBron James carrying a garbage team to the NBA Finals. And there was no contest, there was no doubt as to who was gonna win. And now I'm gonna go with another one that I think is uncontroversially one of the best in the last 25 years. The 2013 NBA Finals. Again, 7-game series, comeback win for the Heat. You had the Ray Allen shot, which is, I think, still, the greatest moment in NBA's finals history. You had two teams that were really in the prime of their respective dynasties. It was really just a fantastic series from start to finish. And while we're on the topic of Heat versus Spurs, I'm going to put the 2014 NBA Finals in the B tier. Now, this NBA Finals really suffers mostly from competitiveness because the Spurs won in 5. I believe the last 2 games, as well as one of the earlier games, was a complete blowout. But the reason why I'm giving it a B instead of a C or a D is because this NBA Finals, I think, is underrated in how important it was. The Spurs really did a lot of unique stuff in terms of how they won this finals. The ball movement was on a level that was never seen before in NBA history. I think it really set the stage for a team like Golden State to really break through. And then, of course, on a basketball level, even though it was a blowout, the way the Spurs dissected the Heat in 2014 still remains just one of the most beautiful things you'll ever see in basketball. All right, now let's talk about the recent Warriors championship. So starting with 2015, I'm gonna put this in the C tier. In terms of competitiveness, it was relatively competitive. The reason this is in C is because it had a huge asterisk next to it. And that was, of course, Kyrie and Kevin Love being injured. All right, and then for the 2017 NBA Finals, I'm gonna put it in the D tier, and 2018 belongs in the F tier. Now, for these two finals, I think 2017 was more competitive than 2018. 2017, I think, was more important because it was Kevin Durant's first championship. And I think Kevin Durant actually needed to do a lot in that series to kind of prove himself. Whereas in 2018, it kind of felt like the Warriors had it all wrapped up regardless of whatever happened. Neither were particularly interesting. The Warriors were heavy favorites to win in both. So I think compared to 2015, these two NBA finals deserve a tier below. Now for the 2012 NBA Finals, I'm gonna put it in the C tier. Again, decently competitive NBA series. No major injuries to either side. In terms of significance, LeBron's first championship. But again, he was going up against a very young OKC team, and it kind of took the 2013 NBA Finals for him to really cement himself as an unquestionable NBA champion, having defeated the San Antonio Spurs, who had previously never lost in an NBA Finals. And then we have the 2006 NBA Finals, in which the Heat won over the Mavericks, and I'm gonna put this in the C tier as well. This would be higher for me if not for the fact that so much of it was riddled with questions about the referees and whether or not it was a little bit rigged. There was a surprisingly large amount of questionable calls towards the end. A lot of people felt like Dwayne Wade got bailed to the free throw line more times than he deserved. This wasn't the start of a dynasty for either team, right? The Heat would struggle mightily after their championship in 2006 and wouldn't do much in the playoffs until LeBron came in 2011. And then the Mavericks wouldn't win until 2011. And then we have the 2011 NBA Finals, and I'm gonna put this in the S tier as well. An upset victory. It was competitive throughout most games. There's obviously a lot of historical significance behind this. It actually reminds me a lot of like the 3-act plot method in storytelling, or like the hero's journey, where sometime in the middle of the journey, they're at their lowest point where it seems like all hope is lost. That's kind of what it felt like in LeBron's own personal heroic journey. And then you, of course, have the amazing performance by Dirk Nowitzki. You had guys like Jason Terry, Sean Marion, Tyson Chandler, all playing very interesting roles. They're kind of like weird players that you wouldn't think fit together, but surprisingly, they fit together really well. And so, yeah, the 2011 finals are in the top tier for me. All right, now let's go way back, and we're going to talk about Michael Jordan's NBA finals, or at least I should say the 3 NBA finals since 1994. So the best NBA finals between 1996, 97, and 98 for me was 96, when they went up against the Seattle Supersonics. I'm going to put that in the B tier. This was a fairly unique NBA Finals in the sense that the Bulls went up 3-0, and then the Seattle Supersonics made a major shift in putting Gary Payton on defense against Michael Jordan, and then the Seattle Supersonics won 2 straight games until the Bulls finally closed it out in Game 6. I think there's a fair amount of historical importance here. This was Jordan's first championship after coming back. It was also kind of his revenge year after the Bulls got knocked out by the Magic. And then similarly in the B tier, I'm going to put the 1988 finals, and then in the C tier, I'm going to put the 1997 finals. These 2 NBA finals were surprisingly similar in structure. Both of them went to Game 6. Both involved an important game-winning shot. In 1997, it was Steve Kerr hitting a wide-open jumper. In 1998, it was Jordan's famous push-off mid-range pull-up in Utah. And the reason why I put 1998 a little bit above 1997 is because 98 was Jordan's last championship. It was Jordan getting his 6 rings and saying, boom, that is my legacy. By the way, I should mention that this particular ranking was made by Rohan, so I'll put a link down to this webpage in case you want to make your own rankings. And of course, you're always welcome to do so, and you can compare it to mine. You can send me the pictures on Twitter or Instagram, whatever. All right, now let's move on to the other Spurs championships. So starting with 1999, I'm going to put this in the F tier. As a kind of refresher for some of you who don't remember, I don't blame you because it was pretty boring. In 1999, the Spurs went up against the New York Knicks. That year, the New York Knicks were the 8th seed. That's right, they were the 8th seed in the league. And it was never much of a question going in or coming out of series who was the better team by far. I've made a video talking about how the New York Knicks made the NBA Finals in 1999 as the 8th seed, so you should go check that out if you're interested. And then for the 2003 NBA Finals, I'm going to put this in the C tier. Again, a fairly average playoff series, nothing particularly interesting. The Spurs beat the New Jersey Nets in the NBA Finals. This is a year where we got to see someone like Manu Ginobili really shine on the big stage. If I remember correctly, this was a series where Tim Duncan recorded a almost quadruple double in the NBA Finals. But, other than that, fairly average series, nothing particularly interesting or important coming out of it. Then we have the 2005 NBA Finals. I'm going to put this in the B tier. This was a 7-game series, which puts it pretty high automatically for me. The reason why it's not A tier or S tier, it was incredibly boring to watch and grueling. I mean, this was a series where you had very low scores every single game. Nobody could shoot. Nobody could make any baskets. So it was not particularly entertaining to watch unless you're kind of a basketball weirdo and you just watch people failing at playing basketball. I think probably a part of this series that people don't think about as much is the fact that, after the Pistons won in 2004, there was a lot of expectations for them to eventually become a dynasty. They seem to have a lot of the right pieces, especially given the fact that they had one of the top picks in the NBA draft, which unfortunately they used to select Darko Milicic. They should have used it to select Carmelo Anthony, in which case we might be talking about the Pistons as one of the most successful teams of the 21st century. Speaking of the 2000s and the Pistons, 2004 NBA Finals, I think, let me find it right here. This belongs in the A tier for me. Again, you had them going up against the Lakers super team. This was kind of, I think, a mini version of 2016 where you had the underdog team going up against the super team. The super team in 2004 being the Lakers with Kobe, Shaq, Karl Malone, and Gary Payton. Despite the fact that Gary Payton and Malone were pretty old, Malone was still pretty good, better than people would think at age 38 or whatever he was. You had some really good moments. You had a team that was very unique, very defensive focused. You had players that didn't really seem to fit together, but ultimately came together and won. All right, before we jump into the other finals involving the Lakers, let's first talk about the 2 Rockets championships in 1994 and 1995. Now, I'm going to put the 1994 NBA Finals, in which the Rockets went up against the New York Knicks, in the B tier. I think this is again 7-game series. It was the first year after Jordan left the league. So for the first time in 3 years, there was a good chance that the Bulls would not win the NBA championship, although after Jordan left, Scottie Pippen led the Bulls to a surprisingly good record in the regular season. This was a 7-game series. You had Patrick Ewing going up against Hakeem Olajuwon, both players in their prime. It was an epic battle. And then for the 1995 NBA Finals, I'm going to put them in the D tier. Now, this was a sweep. It was a surprise sweep. And the reason why this is not F tier is because the Orlando Magic had a lot of expectations heading into 1995. Heading into the NBA Finals, if I remember correctly, the Magic were slight favorites to win the series. Unfortunately, they were mostly too young, inexperienced. They had some trouble with their role players, and Hakeem Olajuwon just completely outclassed Shaq. So not a particularly entertaining series in general, but there were some interesting and unique things about it that I think makes it slightly better than the other 3 ones in the F tier so far. So I'm going to put the 2000 series in the C tier. This was decently competitive. There was some significance behind it in the sense that this was Kobe and Shaq's first championship in their eventual three-peat. But ultimately, this was a series where Shaq just completely took over and dominated. Kobe was still quite young. He wasn't as good as he would later become in the following years, but you still saw him put up some big moments and have some really good games. And then for the 2001 series, I'm going to put this in the D tier. This would be in the F tier if not for the iconic moments of Allen Iverson stepping over Tyronn Lue, of this unlikely Philadelphia team winning a game at all against this Lakers team. But again, not really competitive. The Philadelphia 76ers never really had much of a chance despite them winning that one game. And then we have in the F tier, their third championship, 2002 against the New Jersey Nets. They swept them in 4 games. As you know, competitiveness is a very important thing when measuring these NBA Finals for me. And Kobe at this point had grew into one of the best players in the league in his own right, in addition to Shaq still being one of the best players as well. So not particularly competitive or interesting. Okay, now let's talk about the remaining 3 championships involving Kobe. We're gonna start with 2008. So this is the one where the Celtics made the trade for Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, and immediately they won the NBA Finals. To me, this puts this in the B tier for me. This was a pretty entertaining NBA Finals to watch. You had some very iconic moments. It was also unique, again, in the sense that the Boston Celtics had only recently just put this team together. It's very rare for a team where you have multiple superstars coming together to immediately produce an NBA championship. It just very rarely happens. And kind of like how in 2011, LeBron was in the second act of the plot, or he was at his lowest point. 2008 was kind of Kobe's lowest point. He lost the NBA Finals, and people were saying, "Oh, you can't win with Shaq," blah blah blah. And speaking of which, 2009 NBA Finals, I'm gonna put this in the C tier. Again, the personal significance to me is what really carries this NBA Finals. You had Kobe proving that he could win a championship without Shaq. The Orlando team that they went up against, again, was pretty interesting. For that time, it was a pretty new and unorthodox offense. You had Dwight Howard in the middle and then 4 shooters around him, guys like Rashard Lewis and Hedo Turkoglu. And then that leaves the 2010 NBA Finals, for which I'm going to put in the A tier. This is a 7-game series, Kobe's redemption against the Boston Celtics. Very entertaining, very competitive all throughout. Is one of the series that I can actually rewatch over and over again. All right, well, this is my final list, the tier rankings for the last 25 NBA Finals. And I know you're wondering, where does the 2019 NBA Finals belong on this list? For me personally, I would probably put it in the C tier. I think the thing that really holds it back, much like the 2015 NBA Finals, is that you have this huge asterisk of the Warriors having KD basically a non-factor. You have Klay Thompson, who got injured in the last game, in Game 6, a game in which if Klay Thompson didn't get injured, the Warriors likely would have won, and then who knows what could have happened in Game 7. But again, there's a lot of significance. Toronto's first championship. The Raptors added in a lot of new pieces like Danny Green and Gasol. You had Siakam grow into a new role, and they somehow pieced it all together at the right time, and they won the championship in their first year together, which is pretty rare. But again, the injury is what really holds it back, so I'd probably put it in the C tier, an average NBA Finals. Okay, well, that is now the complete list. Again, the link to this tier maker will be in the description below, so you can make your own tier list. You'll screenshot it, you can share it with your other friends who watch basketball, you can share it with me, you can send it to me on Twitter or Instagram, and you can tell me which NBA Finals you think I rank too high or too low, and for what reason. But other than that, thank you for watching this video. I will see you guys next time.